On today's show, we start a very much needed conversation about religion and life. During this episode, some people may feel uncomfortable or question years of traditional beliefs in religion. In the end, the goal is to examine what traditions are working effectively in your life, and is the tradition keeping you from living your best life, or are you truly living your best life? No matter the outcome, always remember to love, live, and laugh. Alright, welcome to Life with Brandon. I want to thank everyone for watching today's show. Today I have a gentleman by the name of Alain Emmanuel who's going to speak with us today about life and religion. Such an interesting topic in today's time, but I definitely think it's definitely worth the discussion. So Alain, thank you for joining us. How are you?
Hi, Brandon. Thanks for having me. It is such a pleasure to be on this with you and to share on your show. I'm excited about your show, and I do think that it's a great opportunity for us to have a meaningful conversation. I think that a lot of people can benefit from the conversation we're about to have. Things that we fail to get involved with a lot of times because of the way culture has taught us to be is to never discuss religion. And I don't want to get ahead of the topic, but never discuss religion and never discuss politics. And when it comes down to that conversation, a lot of people are afraid to have it because they're afraid of the differences. And I think that's partly because people are so connected to what religion means to them at a fundamental level and to their identity. So when you have something as deep as religion that defines your identity, and when that's shaken, it shakes a bit of who you think you are or who you have to be. And I think that's a piece of what we are probably going to delve into naturally, because by default, religion is a piece of our understanding. It's the study of God and faith system, you know? So when you start looking at religion as a way of life and a way of a part of your identity, it does kind of cross certain barriers that make barriers. Yeah.
You know, you said an interesting point that I never put into thought. You said when we are defined, religion defines us. You know, I never looked at it in that light till you just shared that. And that's true. A lot of us were raised based off religion and what it means, and this is how we base our standard of living off religion. So yes, that was the mold that defined us to say, so yeah, it takes a deeper toll when you actually sit down and think about it. It really defines the core, which is why when those subjects are brought up, it could be because thank you for enlightening me on that.
Yeah, and I think that is at the core of the conversation. However, when you speak from a more perfunctory or superficial level, people simply don't like the feeling they get when they disagree about religion, because they get the feeling of I'm something is shifting about who I think I am or how I think I see the world. And I had a conversation with my dad this morning, and I think it's something that is beneficial to share. And that is the way that we understand the world as it is has been shifted. You know, we don't have to point to Corona, but we can. Like, this virus has really shifted a lot of people's perspective of who we are and what we believe as a society. Because before the idea that we are forced to be in our closed quarters for a while, we took for granted the possibility of interacting with people. And all of the things that we said about who other people are, all of the constructs we've made to define the system we live in and the type of society we believe we have, right?
Yeah.
All those ideas were relatively left unchallenged. And when you're quarantined, when you're pulled back from having to have the interactions with others, and then your systems start to break down, and you realize that money is not the value, you are the value. Now, a lot of people haven't come to that realization, right? But when you realize that, part of you gets moved, just like that conversation with religion. A part of you gets moved, and you start to question, was what I believed about the world real? Was it true?
True.
And so, at some very fundamental level, a part of what we're experiencing is that shift. So not to change the conversation, I think that, religion, to stay on topic, I should say, I think religion is our way of understanding God.
Okay.
But at the core of religion, it's our way of understanding ourselves.
That's true. That's interesting. I definitely agree when you said today with the coronavirus and what just has happened just this month, in the month of, the end of March, so now it's April. So the end of March going into April, even people with money will all still need the essential needs. And whether you have money or not, you are doing without some of the essential needs. So you're right, money doesn't make it just go away. Find that you're not really having to stand back and look like, well, who am I? What am I? It brings some self-awareness. Which
and raises questions for those who have bought into quote-unquote the matrix. It raises questions of identity that people are not used to being involved with. People are often thinking that, the idea of identity is a construct you can't move.
You can't move.
And yet, the more we study identity, the more we're able to recognize, oh, wait a minute. The construct of our identity isn't really as steadfast as we think it is. And so perhaps a part of that is being shifted in the questions that come up as a result of systems that we believe were in place to tell us who we are no longer work the way they used to work.
So would it be safe to say that I think for years we have all attached our identity to something or a thing? I'm this way because I can go to the salon every week. I'm this way because I can afford the latest purses, the latest cars, the latest shoes. I'm this because I have $1 million home. So we've attached ourselves to these things that has really gave us a false impression of who we are.
I don't have to say a lot more than that. Bottom line, like really at the core of this conversation is, what are you attaching your identity to? Because again, if the concept of identity was not fluid, right, then we would simply be who we are, right, and we would not be attaching. So now, some people might define it as false identity, meaning that the kind of identity that you are connecting to may not be as steadfast as what you think it is, and that's what you just described. So when you anchor your identity in religion, you have if because religion tends to be very rigid, it tends to require you to be that way. Otherwise, it's a very binary system of I'm either this or I am that. I cannot exist outside of that. And don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to knock religion. I'm trying to expose what religion actually is. So that we're aware when we choose to be a part of a religion what we are being a part of. And there's a difference between having a religious experience in which your identity has certain barriers and having a spiritual identity, which is an identity that can only be identified through the spirit of who God is to you. When that happens, you supersede, you become higher than an identity that simply tells you how to behave. And now it becomes an identity that determines who you are at the core fundamental principle of self.
And when you have that relationship with that spiritual being, that is where you now find out who you are. Your
Who you really are behind the mask. And this is why I said this whole global experience is forcing us to ask certain identifying questions about who we believe we actually are.
Wow.
I love it, Brandon.
I've had this conversation quite a bit with a few other people. I grew up missionary Baptist.
Right. Now we get into missionary Baptist.
Right, missionary Baptist. So being in the country growing up missionary Baptist, things had to operate in accordance of this matter. Or that matter.
Yep.
And if the moment it functioned differently, then you was like, you don't belong. You don't exist. You don't operate. You are not a part of God. And as a child, you don't really think.
Yep.
You just say, you don't think till you become an adult. So you start to see, like, wait a minute, that's kind of a little close. Wait, that's a little harsh thing. That's like, and then also too, as a child, a child has a great imagination. I've learned, and I'm 38. They say everybody has a past. And 38, I've truly learned what that means. Everybody has a past. Because I've seen people that I grew up with in church that was good in two shoes, that was just, you just knew they was in line with the Lord their whole life, their whole purpose. And when they passed away, I'm like, what? Who? Wait, this? Well, why are they just judging these people for this?
And the funny thing about that, without interrupting you while I am interrupting, the funny thing about that is that that's behavior. You see? So that is essentially a person's ability to behave in a certain way so that they look a certain way. And so that's why you can look at somebody and say, well, they seem to fit all of the criteria for this or the religious expectations on them. And at the core, the identity oftentimes has, and this is where, they talk about Christians. See, Christians have gotten a really bad rep. Because they portray, oftentimes, and this is not all Christians, but they oftentimes will portray a certain behavioral expectation. And then when inside of that person, you realize they're actually identifying themselves differently than what it is they are. In other words, they're having what we might call cognitive dissonance. On one side, they're doing one thing, and then when you have the internal dialogue, they're even in their internal dialogue in the way they think of things, they think differently. And so a lot of people who have been turned off by Christians are really actually being turned off by that cognitive dissonance, and they're able to see through it. And they're like, you say this, but your way of thinking says that, and your behavior in other circumstances says this. Which is it? What do you really believe? And so if your center is not clear, if your core of identity is not clear, if you don't know who you are spiritually, then religiously you're going to have cognitive dissonance. You're going to have some clashes. You're going to have places where you're trying to be something that you never really identified with at your core.
Yeah. So okay, growing up missionary Baptists, and missionary Baptists, they had a certain way, a certain caliber, things ran, the way the church ran, the order. A lot of missionary Baptists don't believe in women preachers. Also too.
Women ordination.
Right. Yes. And also in missionary Baptists, when women shouted, it was from a hurt and a pain. It was never from a joyous occasion. So I used to growing up that thinking you had to hurt and you had to feel pain to be closer to God, because that's what I saw.
Now that can take us down another rabbit hole, to be honest with you, because the idea that somehow God is pleased when you are in pain is a bit sadistic, but it's a theological perspective that many Christians hold. This idea that somehow God, and this is not straying from the idea of identity, by the way, but this idea that somehow God is needing your pain in order for you to be somehow better.
Right.
And we could dissect, right? I've got some theories, you know what I mean? But when you think about it, right, what you ought to be looking at is, what does that do to your identity? What does it do to the person you think you have to be? And that will determine the kind of behaviors that you see in church. Easy example, that I've been more was not pointing is the more, and I don't want to get too much into the specifics of theology or theological debates, because once you get into that conversation, that's when people are hurting, right? And so I'm not trying to shake anybody's identity.
Right.
Even though we can, right? And we probably need to at some level. But I'm simply saying, have you ever questioned where your ideas
come from?
And now, one of the things that is very easy to dissect is to look, when you're looking to tell the difference between religion and spirituality, between religion and faith. Okay, I'm saying faith because faith allows Christians to understand where we really are when we're saying this. The difference between religion and faith, right, is that one focuses on your behavior, the other one focuses on your beliefs. And when you're behavior centered in your relationship to God, you struggle with every decision you make, whether or not God accepts you for who you are. Every decision in your life, I have a question of, is God okay with me now? And that okay that we're looking for gives Christians these high and low experiences with God that doesn't allow us to actually experience a God of consistent love.
Now, you just said a whole mouthful. Yeah. I'm really like, wow. Because I sit back and constantly hear certain things from different people, even now in today's time. Constantly say, God is not pleased, or God is not pleased with you, so he's going to put this burden on you, or he's going to do this. And I think a lot of times, instead of instead of we identify with what we did to create our own problem. We like to say, God is doing this to us. But actually, you did this to yourself, not God. And then another form that I have is, don't get me wrong, I believe in God, I have faith. But I also know that I can't sit on the side. I have to get up and go do some things. I got to go get it. I got to make some things happen.
And can I connect there? So
go ahead.
So here's the thing. It's so easy to move from I am okay to I'm only okay when I do certain things for God.
Ah.
Because that movement is what creates the peaks and the valleys. And instead of making your faith about God, you're now making it about you.
You.
It's a self-centered fix versus a God fix. Now, when you get into the theology of it, I have my belief, right? And I don't have shit. I believe, this is my belief, is that God himself is the fixer, and he is the one who came and brought the fix, right? But again, to be very specific and to go into it starts to be in that realm where people have a hard time because there are absolutes that we think we know, and oftentimes we don't. And then there are things that scripturally we believe we understand, and those things oftentimes are very rigid, right? And don't allow you to experience God for yourself. It has to be the experience of someone else. So the question becomes, is your faith experience your faith, or is it the faith of? Right?
Someone else.
Mm-hmm. So for me as a Christian, I believe in faith in Christ and the faith of Christ, right? And understanding those two things as a Christian allows me to know that I am free. I'm a free individual, and God himself, my perception of who God is, right, is that God is eternally loving, and that him was a part of his creation, and that he didn't make a mistake, and that who I am is who he meant for me to be. What he wants for me is nothing but good, and that he will give me the freedom to make choices, and in my choices, he lives, and he's able to show me come out of my life, and it's not a basis of something I can add or take away from what he's given. He can do the doing. Now that's back to the core of understanding. This is not even a religious conversation or even a theological conversation.
What?
Have this conversation. The real conversation we're trying to have. Excuse me, there are some dogs of my neighbors.
Okay.
But the real conversation I'm trying to have is actually whether or not we know the impact of religion on our lives. And this is why when you asked me about, well, what are we talking about? And we were debating, remember, about whether it is life and religion or is it religion and life. And I said, well, I think of life and religion, because if religion comes first, right, you can miss out your life. But if life, you get to live.
You get to live.
The religion becomes now and is something to lift you. The discipline of religion lifts you so that you keep mind in an elevated, inspirational place where God intended us to live, at least based on my belief, right? But if you're living religion and your faith is secondary and your identity is secondary, then you don't even know where. So to your here's the thing. When we have
the ability to recognize faith for ourselves, then we can judge whether or not someone else's opinion or interpretation of faith fits our understanding of scripture. Whatever scripture will give. But when it becomes that it's just about religion, then what you're doing is you're looking at that religion and you're saying, now, how do I change myself to fit that?
To fit that.
And when you start doing that, you find yourself not knowing whose faith you're in. It's whoever you ascribe to, and this is the difference between indoctrination and faith. Faith is belief in something or someone. Indoctrination is a set of ideas that cannot be moved regardless of what my faith says. And so you easily come into this is where you often have the idea of cults and the idea of people following a particular, indoctrination,
right,
seeing things. And so even if you present new information, if that information isn't identical to what has been indoctrinated into this person's faith system, there's no way
they can receive it.
You cannot receive the information. Whether the information is right, wrong, indifferent, truth, light, darkness, it doesn't matter. It just cannot be received. And so this is where the impact of religion can really prevent an individual from even seeing themselves. Oftentimes you point out and you say, look, what you're saying and what you're doing don't make sense to me. And you can't even get the person to see that because it's just a way of being. There's nothing else.
And I agree with that. That makes a lot of sense. I've noticed, especially in the African American community, we as a culture, it's like once we as the church say we've been a part of the world, now we decide to come in and live for Christ. But when you come in to live for Christ, supposedly according to their terms, I've noticed a lot of stuck people. They're there. They don't go any further. They don't go anything. They don't do nothing. You're here. So in terms of a person that's truly living a life where, why do I want to give up enjoying life to only come here to be stuck? Because life was never meant to be stuck. It was to enjoy, to live, to enjoy.
So from a faith standpoint, I would say, isn't it that you have life and life more abundantly in Christ? That's a faith standpoint. From a religious standpoint, the bottom line is, right? The bottom line in that question becomes, what is religion doing? It's not who it's making you be, it's what is it making you do? Because that's where you get stuck. Is in that. What is it? What are you doing that's cyclical, that's creating that stuck individual that can't, and they left, quote unquote, the world, yet the Bible says you're in the world, just not of the world.
Of the world.
You're thinking different, right? But you're not, the world doesn't cease to exist. As a matter of fact, you'd be experiencing the world in much deeper ways because of your ability to have freedom and faith in Christ. Now that's from a Christian standpoint, right? And I realize I'm a Christian, but I'm making the point that inside of these cyclical behaviors, you have the inability of a person who sticks to religion and cannot step outside of the religion to see themselves. You find that rotation, that cycle, right, is what you're talking about when you say, for some reason, they get tired of, they say, oh, I left the world to come into the church, but then they seem more stuck in the church than they were when they were in the world. And that's it's not faith, it's religion. It's not It's not your belief, it's behavior. And you can see, and I said I wasn't going to make this about, make this about a my religion versus yours. But here's the thing, right? When Jesus said it to himself, he said, look, you can't put old wine into new bottles. I mean, and new wine into old bottles.
Old bottles. Shut up now. Shut up now.
So you could do all you want to try to fix the outside. If your faith, which shouldn't be the basis for your religion, if your faith is not anchored, that's how you have so many Christians with the behavior that doesn't make sense, right? And yet their faith, right, is saying the opposite of what they believe. Now, am I saying that because Christians doesn't do exactly what they believe, then they're not Christian? Absolutely not.
No, not. Right.
That's not what I'm saying, right? What I am saying is, if your religion doesn't give you a place where you are human, then perhaps your religion hasn't found the source of your true sense of self. Because you don't, excuse me again, the dogs they're joining in, and I don't know. But so your sense of self, right, who you are, can be positively impacted by faith, or it can become a burden
on you.
And so you have to make that decision when you join religion or a religious sect or group or a faith-based religion. You have to make that decision as to what part of me am I willing to have controlled by religion, and what part is this about having a supreme being being in control.
In control.
Because a lot of times what we're calling God controlling things is some other person's idea of God.
Dear God.
And without that relationship, what you got?
You got nothing. I definitely, in the past 5 years, I have definitely experienced God at a different level, truly for myself.
Yeah.
Meaning that relationship. And when you have that relationship with God, and you move with Him, and you move that time in,
right.
I laugh about it now. I'm still growing. I'm not the pro yet. But I've looked at so many ways that I've moved and what I've done. And when the masses don't agree with what you're doing, and it's working for you,
but it's not working for them.
For them, I'm like, okay, God, I see you. I see you.
You know, that's an interesting conversation. And it's not just a religion conversation either. Because a lot of times when you make a decision for yourself about who you decide you want to be, right? When you make that decision, a lot of times people will have their opinion on the basis on how it affects them. We're relational beings. So when something, if it's like, if somebody tells you something that's inconsequential to them, they'll be like, okay. But if you tell them something that is consequential to how they feel, automatically they feel they have a right to decide for you how you should or shouldn't do things. Here's the issue. Based on most belief systems and faith, you have free will.
Right.
And so where is free will when people feel the need to have a say over another human being's behavior? Now, I'm not speaking about, God's ways of of doing things. And a lot of people will bring up the Ten Commandments and things like this and say, well, what about the Ten Commandments? God gave those things. Okay, that's a faith system, and I understand that, and I actually believe it. But to understand, I'm talking about people having their opinion of your behavior.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And this is where Jesus was like, let me do the judging. Y'all can judge the world eventually, but I'm saying, as far as judging your neighbor and their place in heaven or hell, according to Christian belief, let me do that judging.
Let me do that. Yep. And I'm a strong believer. God can use any and everybody for whatever message he got to come across. People may or may not believe. I've had some great conversation with some drunks, some prostitutes, some homeless people. I talk to anybody. Anybody who knows me, I don't mean a stranger.
Right.
I talk to anybody. And sometimes it's just the conversation to have with people. They can give you a whole different perspective about life, about love, just about being a human being. And you sit and wonder, and it just really questions. Wow, what have I been taught? What have I been learned? What was taught? What I've been growing off of? Like, I didn't get this understanding when I was little. And not to bash, because we all can only be taught at the level of experience of the person that's teaching us. So I totally, hate that work for that time. But this is a constant growing and learning. You never stop learning. You never stop growing. So at some point, you have to want to seek more, seek higher.
Right.
And it's kind of like, basically, technology is a perfect way. Technology grows so fast. In the next 5 years, ain't no telling what we'll be talking on. They probably won't even be phones.
That's a whole nother video.
Right. It grows, and if you don't stay refreshed and up to date with what's going on, you will get left behind because things are constantly changing. And I find out day to day, some of the people fight change. Some of the people want things to remain the same, whether it's for comfort, laziness, scared, whatever the reason. People love to resist change. And I guess I was like that for a while. My biggest thing was I was afraid of sales. I was afraid of sales. I had personality for it, and not that I couldn't do it. I did it as a child, got awards for it, but somewhere along life happened. And I became afraid of sales. Because what I was taught from a religious standpoint versus what I've learned to know and operate would conflict those two. And not knowing at that time how to deal and how to heal. Keyword, how to deal and how to heal. Because you got to know what you're dealing with.
Mm-hmm.
And once you find out what you're dealing with, then you can heal it.
Yep.
And so when I learned to discover that and fix it and work on it, I'm not afraid to sell anymore. Not afraid to do this. Not afraid to venture out. And it'd be amazing, something that started from a childhood of a thoughts.
Just one thought or one word. Sometimes it's just somebody's idea of you that you were given. And because as children, we don't have the capabilities that we have as adults who have critical thinking about what another person is bringing into our atmosphere, or our clues or mind, we receive it. We receive it negative or positive. And sometimes a negative opinion from someone else will live with you for years before you can actually identify it. And some people go to their grave and never identify what they But before you could identify that was an idea, someone's idea of me. And I should know me better than I did. And I should be able to determine who I choose to be instead of who they believe I am.
I
See? So, and sometimes what happens is when you have these kind of ingrained ideas, we build entire lives around it. We build entire systems of thinking around it, thinking that this is, somebody told me when I was a young kid I could not sing. Not me. But, well, actually that kind of happened. But I'm making the point, right? That it says that to you. And then somehow you go with it. You take that thing and now every time somebody asks you to sing, you might shut your mouth. And the next time, an opportunity comes that might actually be good for you, but you go with the other opportunity because somebody told you that.
So,
and it might not even be something you think about consciously, but subconsciously, that idea has already come to light.
yes.
And because this idea of your identity has been shifted with someone else's opinion, you then become something that you don't like. And so you have to decide, like, wait a minute, am I going to be something I don't like in order to sustain an idea of who I think I am based on someone else's information about me? Or will I make that decision about who I am? And for me, as a Christian, I make that decision on the basis of my faith of who God says I am. That's how I apply that to my spiritual faith. Not necessarily to what my religion says I have to do.
Right. Alan, every time I speak to you, you always leave me speechless. I'm just in awe. I've learned. I feel like I grow 2 inches every time I talk to you.
Well,
you have definitely been an eye-opener today. I'm sure our listeners have definitely gained knowledge. And if anything, whether they want to accept it or not, it will force them to look at their life differently. And that is what life will bring us about. It's simply to start a conversation. It's not to judge you, it's not to say what's right or wrong, it's just to have a conversation. About life. Just think about what we've been taught. Just think about it. I mean, from the TV, prime example, we grew up on VHS. Now people are like, what is a VHS? We went from VHS to a DVD to a Blu-ray to now everything digital. So it's like
8-track.
Right, 8-track, right, exactly. Right, 8-track.
Me and music, I can't ever stop listening. I was talking to a friend of mine who's in the music industry. Whatever's left of it now, right? But I was talking to a friend of mine who was talking about 4 tracks and 8 tracks and stuff like that, and I was just thinking to myself, we were so convinced that at the time of ADATs and when the CD first came out, that this is all it's ever going to be. And you start having download cards and digitals, and now you talk about CDs, and people are like, well, that's not even a thing anymore.
It ain't a thing anymore, right?
It really forces you to question, like you were saying, what do we consider as real reality, truth? And what do you, because we're talking religion, I say truth, but so that brings you to the question of, is there absolute truth or not? And that's a whole nother conversation, which is a conversation to get involved with. But I'm just saying, at the end of the day, I don't believe, and this is my faith and belief, I don't believe that God ever intended, right, for us to identify ourselves on the basis of someone else's opinion or idea, or even a theological system for us. I think that what we should be looking at is if because I'm Christian, so I'm going to go with the Bible, right? Mm-hmm. Look at what the Bible teaches you about Christ. That's what I believe. You look at what you learn there, because there are principles there that would allow you to understand who God is and who you are and what your identity is as a human being. Because once you get to that, then it's not shakable by the behavior changes. It's not even shakable by the changes in your atmosphere. For instance, what's going on in our world today cannot shake your faith.
Cannot shake your faith.
We have a clear understanding of who and whose you really are.
Oh,
Not someone's opinion, and not a religious system that tells you this today and tomorrow changes their mind because they misinterpret it.
that is so true. That is very, very true. Getting to the core, to defining religion and life. If you actually break religion, you can enjoy your life.
Yeah, and you can live abundantly. That's the beautiful. There's a so the word abundant oftentimes I think is used in a religious sense, and we miss what the actual word is saying. Abundant has to do with a lot of life. You're not limited to just this section of life is how I have to live. That's
Right.
no true. You can live with a lot of the experience of what life really is.
Right. Abundance to the wealth of life, spirit, air, resources. I
Finance,
totally agree.
all of that, to live in abundance, you don't have to be stuck in an idea.
Stuck in the idea. Yes, and so many of us, the idea is what we want is right here, but because of the idea, we can't move forward to grab it. We get stuck right here.
Yeah.
And we go, well, what if this? What if that? What is that? It is too many. And the more we talk ourselves, the further we get away instead of getting closer to here. And I say I used to be one of those individuals.
Yeah. I think we are.
Alan, again, I want to thank you for coming on the show. I definitely think there's going to be a part 2.
Yeah.
It's definitely going to cause some conversation. And that's what we want. We want to have a conversation. We're not judging anybody. We're not saying what's right or wrong. It's just simple. Let's talk about it. Let's really talk about it. Because something that I've learned, everybody likes to grow with the church. And I never could understand that. By the time the church catch on to growing, it's a whole other phase.
Yeah, you're right. I think, and that comes from that dogmatic, doctrinal that steps away from faith.
Right. And so, I'm just like, you know what? I sit back and I think, and I never understood. Used to be older people in church, older ladies who would know the word, and you wonder why they would stop coming to church. Well, that's wrong with them. They just stopped coming to church, and I never understood that until I was in my late 20s. Yeah, late 20s, early 30s. I met this lady. She was actually a pastor. She said, Brandon, when you really get in and have a relationship with God, and the things that you learn, you get exposed, and you see, she like, we don't get this wrong for so long. Till it's just not even, it's like, it's not funny, we don't get it wrong for so long. And she like, that's why I step away.
Yep.
I do my thing. So I ain't telling you to step away.
Right.
I had to learn it in my time. But she like, she stepped away. She like, I do my thing.
And here's the thing. The religious part of church oftentimes classifies those people as lost.
Yes.
And yet oftentimes it's because they literally have found God in places that they never thought God existed. And they were able to say, you know what? And I'm not advocating leaving the church. I'm advocating being the church.
Sure. Yeah.
So that they find themselves saying, wait a minute, God is much bigger than what they're telling me. God is much more loving than what they're telling me. God is smarter than what they're telling me. God is, more inclusive. Yeah. And when that happens, there's a shift in the person's perspective, and all of a sudden it changes what they believe can or can't happen.
You know, I grew up, like I said, missionary Baptist. I was always told your church come first, even before your home. So for a while, I believed that until you start reading words like, no, your family. And when you start to really think about it's your family first in the church, and when you get deeper, you start to realize the church is just a building. The church is within you. You can go anywhere and talk about God, praise God, have a conversation, share a word. It don't have to be in the church. And when you look at today's time, we can't even go to church. Churches are having to close their doors. Huh?
That'll tell you everything.
Yeah. So they have to close the doors. So now people are forced to really that's something to look at. So now all the people judge about having church online. What are you doing on Sunday morning? You was online.
And it's forcing you to have, I'm not even making fun of it, but there are people who get dressed, right, to go online now, and I'm not knocking it. I'm just saying question to go online, to sit in front of the computer, to have church. All right? And so my question to you is, when are you going to question what you have on and its meaning to God and your faith? So anyway, I know we're close to the conversation, but I'm just saying these are the real impacts of religion on life.
That is definitely a part too, because if y'all know how many times I praise God in the shower.
Right. Now, you know. Anybody who knows Brandon knows that Brandon don't mind anyone. Thank you, Jesus.
Anyone. Yeah. I have to get marked when I go in the bathroom. I have to laugh at myself sometimes. So, yes. Oh, my goodness. Oh, my God. Alain Emmanuel, thank you for stopping by with us. Thank you.
It's a pleasure.
For the priceless moments, the priceless education. I love to be intrigued by provocative thinking.
Yeah, me too.